Hey, how you doing?
Hello.
People, people of the internet, of the interwebs. And Alan Colson, hello, my friend. How are you?
Doing good, Marty. How are you doing tonight?
Doing okay. Thank you. And we're here on a Wednesday night.
We are. We're trying something a little new.
What's the idea behind these shows? This
Uh,
show?
I think the idea was to cover some topics that they're not really long enough to fill in an entire Friday night stream with a guest, but would still touch bases on things we'd like to talk about or topics that people have asked one or both of us to comment on and cover. And so it's like, well, hey, why don't we just do that as sort of just a two-man outing on a shorter time frame so that we can still talk about the topics without feeling like we have to try to find a way to turn it into a 3 or 4 hour outing on a Friday night.
Yeah. And I've had a few people asking about what thoughts were on the new Carcass, and it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like Carcass would be a good topic to break the ice on a Wednesday night, and get both of our perspective on the new album, but we'll take it one step further and kind of go through the whole discography. There's only 7 albums total and a few EPs here and there, which I don't have
Mm-hmm.
all the EPs, but I've got some of them we could talk about. But Carcass. Alan, where do you sit with Carcass?
Carcass is a band I've always liked. They've never been like one of my top 10 bands or anything like that, to be fair, but I've always liked them. They were one of the death metal bands I got into relatively early when I started discovering death metal in high school. And so, yeah, kept up with them. I came in on Necrotism was the first one that, me and my peer group were picking up on. And then, eventually worked my way backwards and kept up with them as we went forward from that one. If I remember right, and it's been a minute now, but I first heard Carcass and about Carcass from a girl in my high school English class. She was really cool. Her name's Jennifer. She went on to be like a military industrial engineer, so super smart gal. Uh, but one of the few people in my high school who had really good taste in music, and we let each other borrow cassettes all the time with stuff. And yeah, at one point she asked me, "Have you heard of this new band Carcass?" And it's like, "Yeah, I've heard the name. I hadn't heard any music by them at that point." She's like, "Okay, they sound really neat." She'd read some kind of little interview snippet somewhere about the crazy medical dictionary lyrics and all that stuff. And it's like, "Oh yeah, well, we're gonna have to check that out." And I think she tracked down a tape before I did, and then I eventually tracked down and had to get a copy of it as well. So that's where I kind of waded into the abattoir with Carcass. What about you?
Yeah, I mean it. Found out about them through a friend. My buddy Scott was always um, at the forefront of this stuff, and I was the hanger on that always heard the stuff secondhand and usually hated it up front because I always hate things first and end up liking them very much later. And Carcass was no exception. They were something. I'm pretty sure it was Reek, Putrefaction was the first album I heard, which that's a tough. That's a tough. We'll get into it, but that's a tough.
Yeah.
It's really cool. The sound of it's really awesome. I like the album, but it's a mess. You can tell it's made by kids,
Oh
and
yeah.
but they're doing something quite innovative. They're taking a swipe at the grindcore movement that was starting in Britain, and they were putting their own hooks into it and coming at it
Mm-hmm.
from a different, a bunch of vegan dudes.
Yep.
Uh, they kind of really came at it with a very smart. I mean, even the name Carcass to me always struck me as a very intelligent, even though it's a gross name essentially and a gross technical term for a body, whether it's animal or human.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they always come at it from a very scholarly perspective, whether they're just basically regurgitating stuff out of medical textbooks, which is pretty damn hilarious. But
Yep.
Jeff Walker always did put it into a very unique spin. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to think when I first heard Carcass, but multiple listens finally broke the ice, and they became a very huge band in my teenage years and my high school years for sure. Well, actually, one of my favorite albums came out the year I graduated high school. So, just as I was getting out of high school and that whole era afterwards, I was just obsessed with Carcass. Obsessed. One of the best bands, one of the best death metal bands, really back in that era. For me, and that's why I took their stylistic changes so personal. I think when they started to shift their sound. But I'm rambling. We're here to talk about Carcass, and I guess I could give a little bit of info. They were formed in '86. 2 members, Jeff Walker, who came from the band The Electro Hippies, and Bill Steer, who came from Napalm Death and another band. I can't remember the other band off the top of my head, but they were there since the beginning, and they are still there today. So the core essence of Carcass is still there, and they broke up in '96 after the album Swan Song, and they reformed in 2007. They were asked to play Wacken and the Tuska open air festivals in the year 2007. Went well, so they started making music again shortly thereafter. But well, not shortly thereafter. It took them a little bit of time to get things going, but that's where we are. So should we start with the beginning and work our way in?
Sounds like a plan. Absolutely. So that means that puts us, as you said, it formed in '86, and then within a couple of years, '88, you would have 88. Yep, you'd have reek of putrefaction would hit shelves, and I'm sure it shocked and freaked a whole hell of a lot of people out. Grindcore was, on the map already. Napalm, of course, was already an established thing and doing pretty well. Under, of course, a lot of, thumbs up from John Peel really helped get them attention and get them exposure on national radio in the UK. And then Carcass kind of, followed suit. They were doing a very similar style. They're in that same grindcore camp. That album's got 22, 23 songs packed onto it.
Yeah.
Yep. And once again, got, a big
22 songs,
big thumbs up from John Peel. I think, he cited it repeatedly as his favorite album of 1988. And like Napalm, and you mentioned this earlier, they were, coming at this very, sort of new and extreme style of music, but coming at it from a pretty intelligent point of view. I think it's very easy for some folks, if they don't pay a lot of attention to grindcore, to assume that it's all just kind of mindless blasting. But, with Napalm, it was very much, a political, statement when you're paying attention to it. And as you said, Carcass, didn't go the political route, but they adopted, this other kind of, very, very strong sense of humor, but, looking at it, from, this, kind of, vegetarian, vegan point of view of, meat and stuff, and then working in the very fancy medical terminology which gave it sort of, and I've seen in interviews, Jeff, struggle to find kind of the right wording for this, but giving it kind of a little bit of a highbrow or intellectual feel, while at the same time, understanding that it also made it feel very over the top and ludicrous simultaneously, which somehow they struck a good balance there. That it didn't come across as snooty and it didn't come across as too absurd. It was kind of a good mixture of both.
It's like that whole thing was filtered through like a Faulty Towers, real highbrow British humor type of bent to it.
It very much is a British humor kind of bent, and I think that may also explain why there's always a segment of fans who just latched onto that and took it very seriously, and kind of ran in the opposite direction that they were supposed to with it, because a lot of folks outside the UK, sometimes British humor does just go right over people's heads in other territories, and they didn't get the joke necessarily. They were just like, oh gosh, these guys are total, Texas Chainsaw psychopath sickos, and they started, gore grind kind of went in that direction, which wasn't necessarily what Carcass was trying to get across. I don't think.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they inadvertently inspired a whole genre of music.
They really
even
did.
down to this early album cover, that sick green logo mixed with the yellow jaundice looking dead bodies, which Jeff Walker, he was an artist. He cut and pasted all this stuff out of books and made these epic collages. He also did Napalm Death Scum, I believe. And he did some other covers from back in the day as well. Very talented guy for sure. But
yeah, I think that's one of the big lasting legacies of that album too, is the cover art. That it really, the Napalm covers were very cool, but they were graphic in a different sense. They weren't.
Yeah.
They didn't have this grisly element that the cover for Reek brought on board. That Lord, a million bands since then have taken that and tried to emulate it, copy it, one up it, all the way down to bands like Fluids today and stuff.
Pathologist, and Hemorrhage, and Exhumed, and tons.
Yeah, Carcass. Well, maybe musically, Carcass wasn't doing anything extremely different from what Napalm was already on the map doing. Just the graphics and the imagery of what they were doing definitely gave grindcore an avenue into gore grind.
Yep.
So yeah, I think, as you said, sonically the album is a tough listen.
It's tough.
It's not my cup of tea, but it definitely it has a legacy, and it establishes its own offshoot for a genre that had just recently got started.
Yeah, and people misinterpreted me as saying that I don't like this album, which I do. It's just a mess. The album is a mess. That you take that as a good thing, take that as a bad thing. It just is. I mean, you could tell these are young guys. I mean, they're kind of taking what's going on in grindcore. They introduced the two vocalists. I mean, that bands, the punk side of grind was doing that with Extreme Noise Terror and bands like Disrupt, although Disrupt came later. But two vocalists weren't unheard of in hardcore. So I mean, that's where you can kind of see where Carcass was coming from. But they tempered their dual vocal attack with technology. They had the pitch shifter going on. Bill Steer has just a naturally really low voice. Jeff Walker was screaming through pitch shifter. It gave it a very sickly sound. I like this album, but it's a mess. The production is really rough. You really got to listen to it a lot, and you got to want it to really get these songs. But for me, they really this was the blueprint, and they really refined it on this masterpiece, Symphonies of Sickness, which came out 1 year later, 1989.
And it's a big step forward within just a year's time. Yeah.
Huge.
That the band famously said, and I think everybody believes in that. Yeah, they never expected to be anything more than a one album band. They're kids. They're going to make this one crazy over the top album and be done with it and have a laugh, and that'd be the end of it. But all of a sudden, it started to turn into a thing, and they started to advance pretty quickly. Which is probably, again, I know there's a lot of folks that wanted them, and still to this day want them to just go back and redo stuff like Reek. But I think it was definitely to the band's advantage that they started to refine that sound a little bit.
Agreed.
You when you're doing something as raw and extreme as Reek of Putrefaction, how many times can you do that and it really stay interesting and fresh before you just get completely bypassed or forgotten by all the other bands that are going to try to copy that? You better stay ahead of the pack before you get lost in the crowd.
And for me, this album finds them emerging from the snarled mess into a very sophisticated, I mean, there's some very sophisticated song structures, and the riffs, the guitar sound is very sharp. The songs are so well crafted, and the riffing is so atypical and very cool. And I remember the first time I heard this, I didn't get it. It took numerous listens, but once the fog lifted and I connected with it. The riffs are so catchy. You know, even though they're really extreme sounding, I don't know what they're tuned to, A or B. I think they're probably in the A range, and then they tuned up for this. But they really, the difference of a year, it was really huge on their songwriting. It's really hard for me to pick up my favorite because it's either this one or Necroticism. They're tied as far as I'm concerned, but this is a timeless classic. I've listened to this album a million times, and I cannot say that I'm sick of it. I'm not. I could put it on right now and listen to it twice in a row, more than likely.
Yeah, I don't revisit that album as much as the others. Like you said, they've definitely, they're finding their sound there. For me, there's still some room for improvement. There's still, it's still a little rough around the edges, but yeah, it's, a big step forward from Reek, and they're figuring out where they want to go, and they're doing it very quickly. So yeah, very solid album. I just, I don't go back and play it as much because when I'm going back to play older Carcass, I'm going to probably play the album we're about to get to in just a moment.
Yeah, which we'll throw on right now. This came out in 1991. Necroticism, Descanting the Insalubrious, I believe.
I ain't going to challenge that.
What an amazing this album and symphonies I've listened to a million times. And again, they got even more sophisticated in the songwriting. The songs are even more catchy, but they still hold very true to that dark, sick, twisted nature that they arrived at on symphonies. This is great. I mean, there's no more pitch shifter vocals on this. It's just them. Jeff's vocals are just razor throat, scathing, amazing. Bill's very deep. He almost sounds pitch shifted, but I don't think he was. But what an amazing album. And this also finds the guitar talents of Michael Amott from Sweden entering the fray, which, I really struggle to wonder what he brought to the band. I mean, to me, maybe a little more melody. I don't know how involved he was in the songwriting at this point. I think they just brought him on to fill out the live sound. I could be wrong with that, but there's still the same level of songwriting. As these two are definitely conjoined twins as far as I'm concerned, with Necroticism having a slightly better production, and a little cleaner tone. But what do you think? What do you think on this?
Yeah, I like this one a lot. This one, I think,
amazing.
Yeah, they're taking, they're following up on symphonies, and they're really nailing it on this one. For me, I would definitely take this one over symphonies. But again, this was also my entry point for Carcass, so there may be a bias there. With Michael Amott, obviously, really good guitarist, and having him in the lineup certainly didn't hurt matters any. I know the band had wanted him on board earlier. He had been offered a spot in Carcass in the early days and turned them down and regretted it. And then at this point, they came back and again wanted to get that 2-guitar lineup established. And so they went back and said, "Hey, would you like to join this time?" And he's like, "Yes." Apparently, he really regretted having turned him down the first time, and so he jumped at the fence to get on board the second time. Everything about this album is very cool. The little spoken passages in between the songs where it sounds like you're kind of listening to like a recording of a lecture from a medical university. Describing it sounds very gimmicky, but it fits into the album extremely well. It's got just this, again, slightly intellectual sounding, but also slightly weird sounding. It makes you feel a little uneasy at the same time that it's giving it this little classy touch. It's weird, but it works so well in between these songs. The vocals, they feel very strong. Apparently Jeff and Bill both, one reason they had dual vocals early on was that neither of them really wanted to sing a whole lot. It was like, well, look, I'll do these parts and you do those parts. And then neither of us has to sing all the time. But here they're both, they're very comfortable with it by this point. And I think that's, why this is the album I reach for. It's weird to me too. This seems to be the one album that gets talked about the least.
I know. I don't get it.
Yeah, people, the old school fans only seem to focus on Reek and symphonies. And of course, then the fans that like, the later sound, you start focusing on the next album and working forward. And this album a lot of times just gets skipped over, and it shouldn't. It's arguably the best in their catalog. It's hard to compare them because everyone, the sound keeps progressing as we're going to discuss. But yeah, this album should never be skipped over when talking about great Carcass
Oh
albums.
God, it's at the top. This and Symphonies are tied for me. I depending on the day of the week, I could choose either one as the best. I
That's
enjoy
fair.
them both so much. Necroticism, hold on. Necroticism is similar to Death's Human in their discography, question mark. I don't
Hmm.
see. He's asking the question, is it similar to Death's Human? I don't really see it as that big of a transitional album. I think the next album we're going to talk about is probably The Human in the Carcass pantheon. But we'll get there. There's one little release that came out before that album, and that is Tools of the Trade. It's a little EP that came out. This has the song Tools of the Trade, Incarnate, Solvent Abuse, which is off of Necroticism, Rotten to the Gore, Hepatic Tissue Fermentation 2. So fun little stopgap in between. Carcass has always kind of done this, and they continue to do so. Maybe one good song on them and a couple okay songs. They're never really an essential release to own, but collector scum, you got to have all of it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that leads us to 1993's Heartwork,
Yep.
which is, I would say, the popular opinion, what most people call the best definitive at the top of the mountain Carcass. What do you think?
Probably so. Yeah, I think if you asked, enough fans, that one's going to come out, with the most first place votes. Other albums are certainly going to be represented in that sampling, but yeah, I think most folks would, at the end of the day, that would probably win the contest for most popular Carcass album. I think for a lot of folks, and again, part of that may be point of entry. This of course is when Earache was working, with major label distribution, and this was one of the first albums, to come out of that deal and get a huge push. So it's where a lot of the folks is where the band became visible to a lot of folks. And it's right, it was also coming out right when death metal kind of dominated the heavy landscape at that point, at least in the United States. Thrash, was very very much kind of being shoved out the back door. Hair metal was dead, and nobody was paying any attention to traditional metal. Everybody was focused on death metal, and this album, came out, so it couldn't help but get a lot of attention and a lot of notice. And in a lot of ways, deservedly so. It is an album that has a lot of very strong points going for it.
For me, people have mistakenly thought that I dislike this album, which I don't. This is a really great album. It's just not an album that should have been made by a band named Carcass. It's just when you come off of Symphonies of Sickness and Necroticism, that just have a gristled, even though there's cleanliness in the production, they just have Jeff Walker's voice is just so gristled and the music is so snarled. It sounds like giblets boiling out of a blood bucket, but in a good way. And this, I mean, you got the H.R. Giger, however you want to say it, album cover, which is very clean, pristine, sterile.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, I think, transcended into the very slick production. I mean, there's no denying the music on this album is great. It's great. It's a great album. It's really perfect in a lot of ways, which I think is kind of to the band's detriment in a lot of ways. But because they could never really hit this point again, or they never really tried until they got back together, I guess. But to me, this is their Death Human. I think this is where they really started to break away from their past. They're shedding that gore grind, slick, twisted death metal persona and evolving into more of a melodic death metal a la what was really going on in Sweden during this era. But what year was this? This was 93.
This was 93 for this one, yep.
So melodic death metal was becoming quite huge in Sweden. And, you know, I don't know, produced by Colin Richardson, who also produced Necroticism. Did he also do symphonies?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
But I mean, it's really slick. The music is really amazing. Don't get me wrong. I really love this album, but it sounds to me like a different band with Jeff Walker singing on it.
Yeah, they've come a very long way in a very short period of time. And I definitely get where, you know, fans like yourself came from, and having that, you know, strong disconnect, you know, with this phase of the band and what had come before. It didn't affect me as much, and part of that may have been not getting into the band as early, that, you know, I went from Necroticism to this, which there's a big change there, but it's not as drastic as it was for somebody who was coming from, you know, Reek of Putrefaction and coming all the way to this album or anything like that. But yeah, it's a very strong album. It got a big push. It's sort of, you know, the band peaking during their first run in terms of, you know, popularity, sales, visibility, all that stuff is really good. If I've got one complaint about the album myself, I'm looking at the track list right now. Just for me personally, the album is maybe a little bit front loaded. I feel like this is one where, when I had it on cassette at one point, I played the first side a lot more than I played the second side. Not that the second side is bad. I just feel like maybe it tails off, for me personally, a little bit. A lot of my favorite songs are, in the first half of the album.
Well, it's kind of like Slaughter of the Soul.
A little bit, yep. And this is that's a good album to actually bring up here. Someone in the comments a minute ago mentioned that, you know, this album has kind of developed a reputation for helping birth some more of the, you know, mellow death or, you know, screamo metal stuff that would come out more like around the beginning of this century. And yeah, there is something to that. I usually hear Slaughter of the Soul is the album I always hear referenced as, you know, a big influence on those bands that went into more the mallcore kind of sound. But yeah, Heartwork would be, you know, kind of in that camp as well. I can see where bands would have heard that sound and change the vocals a little bit, change the song structures, but, you know, keep the overall framework of what Carcass did on Heartwork. And yeah, you end up with some of those subgenres that would become popular about, you know, 5 to 10 years after this album was released.
But I will say the one cool thing, even though their music got a lot slicker, I agree with you on all that, by the way, Alan. Even though the production got a lot more slick, the songwriting a lot more streamlined, a lot more melodic, I do applaud the fact that Jeff Walker continued to sing with his snarled death metal tone. I mean, a lot of, like, even bands up in Sweden, like Dark Tranquillity and other bands, started messing around with clean vocals, which that would have been a slight as far as I'm concerned. That
probably really would have been a bridge too far for a lot of folks.
Oh, that would have been uncalled for. And the fact that Bill Steer was no longer singing, someone mentioned that they missed Bill Steer singing on that. It's funny because you read later interviews and Jeff Walker even missed Bill Steer's vocals on that stuff and wanted him to come when they got back together. He basically insisted that Bill Steer started singing again. You know, if you're going to do this, you need your vocals are part of Carcass, and it should be there. But
yeah. I guess one other good point to make about this, since, you know, we already mentioned this was when, you know, the band, you know, was, you know, on sort of a major label and getting a big push, and they had this big change towards a kind of a cleaner sound. Nobody has ever claimed there was any label influence. There was never any label pressure to make, you know, the hit album. You know, folks from the Carcass camp, the Ear 8 camp, have always been pretty straightforward in saying, like, no, to their credit, the label never came in and said, hey, you guys have to record a radio hit or anything like that. That, you know, bands may have felt some internal pressures, like, oh yeah, let's try to make a really big, more popular sounding album. But you know, this was not a case of some executive coming in and telling Carcass, you know, we can't put autopsy photos on the cover of this, find something classy. This was,
Yeah.
this was the band just naturally growing and, changing over time. It
And
wasn't
that's what happens as a
label.
musician. Yeah, as a musician, you just subconsciously progress. I mean, I think every band wants to progress to a certain extent, get a little bit, each album a little bit more involved, maybe a little bit better, but you can kind of tell they were listening to a lot of melodic death metal at this time. I mean, it just kind of seeps into your yeah, Eric Bauer says No Love Lost was the radio hit on Heartwork. Kind of. It was the video,
Yeah.
But shortly after Heartwork, Carcass put out another EP called the Heartwork EP. This has got 3 songs on it. It's got Heartwork, This Is Your Life, and Rotten Roll. It's been so long since I've listened to this. I do not remember Rotten Roll or This Is Your Life, although I think Rotten Roll started to get a little bit groovier. Again, produced by Colin Richardson. This was probably a lot of stuff that was recorded during the Heartwork times, and they just bled it over onto this. But 3 years later, we've got the band, what would be the band's final album for a while, Carcass.
You might say it was their swan song.
Yep, this is their swan song. Alan, what do you think?
This album obviously has its issues. I have always liked this album. I know for a lot of folks it was a disappointment, and I get that. It is obviously a step down, maybe 2 steps down from what they did with Heartwork, but it still had a lot of songs on it I enjoyed at the end of the day. Now, the album, of course, was put together under pretty terrible circumstances. Reading the band's memories of it, that almost from day one, Bill told Jeff and the others, he says, "I'm just not feeling this anymore." That it was very hard to get him involved in the writing process. His heart wasn't in it. Musically, he was just in another space, and so that, of course, meant there's a lot of tension there, trying to, with Jeff trying to pull him into the right frame of mind to get this going, and Bill just not being on board. And essentially the band, was already broken up by the time this album hit the shelves. Bill had said, "I'm finishing this album, but then I'm done with this." And Jeff was always like, "Well, there's no way in hell I'm doing this band without him." So, the writing was on the wall before the print was even on the J cards. The band fell apart in the process of recording this album, which I'm sure explains a lot of, some of the missteps on the album. That said, I still like it. Again, especially the first half, I feel there's a lot of, good songs there that I do enjoy. It also, again, like the previous album, I feel it's a bit front-loaded, but I don't mind this one as much as a lot of folks do. But I can see why folks were disappointed with it when it came out. I feel like I missed it upon release. It just somehow wasn't on my radar, and that I ended up picking up a little bit, maybe a year or 2 down the road after it had come out. So maybe also that I was kind of a little, sheltered from that initial shock of hearing it right away. But what are your thoughts on it, Marty?
This was a unforgivable sin at the time, and I listened to this album today after not touching it since it's come out. I figured, a lot of time has passed. I like newer Carcass. I know there's a little bit of a swan song influence to that stuff. I'm gonna try it again and see if I really like it. And other than the songs, "Keep On Rotting in the Free World," which is the lead-off track, that's a good song. Mm-hmm. I also like the beginning of side B, "Polarized." There seems to be a little bit more of an older, more aggressive twist to that song, a little more speed. And then a couple of the later tracks, I don't know if it was "Rock the Vote" or "Don't Believe a Word" or "Go to Hell." No, "Go to Hell" was the single off this. That was in a movie, wasn't it? I don't know. That's not a good song, but
yeah, "Don't Believe a Word" isn't bad. I like that one.
They went from, well, first of all, it's very strange that a band that started off on a very independent label with an album called Reek, Putrefaction ended up on Columbia Records. That just is insanity. And this was sent as a promo back in the day, and this is just the earache This is the Mosh 160, the earache edition. I don't know if this got released on a bigger label or not. I have no idea. But this is just the band sounding very tired, very directionless, other than rock. I mean, the whole first side is rock beats. There's very, very few double bass treatments. It's just, and then side two's got a couple instances of cowbell. I don't know if they're taking a piss on this stuff doing that. They're just trying to lean into the rock thing, but it seems very awkward to me. The songs are very, other than Keep on Rotting and The Free World and Polarized, very boring, very tired. They just sound like they sound uninspired and lost on this album.
And they, as we talked a moment ago, they were, Bill, but Bill was wanting to go in more of a rock direction. He didn't want to blast or grind or anything at that point in his career. So the album makes sense in terms of what the band was going through with all that. In terms of the label, even that became a real mess for the band, because they were, I don't remember all the details here, but Earache's collaboration with Columbia fell apart real fast.
I think a lot of those bands did, and Tombs did as well.
Well, the whole Earache deal, Columbia, Earache, Columbia, hooked up with Earache. They put out 6 or 8 albums very rapidly, all within an 8-month window or so.
Morbid Angel, Godflesh. Yep.
Yeah, it was probably part of the problem. There's just too many albums came out too fast. None of them could really take off because you've got too many things all running in the same direction. And as a result, the whole deal was undone. Columbia's basically like, okay, we gave this a try and it didn't really fire off, so it separated out. There was something that Carcass was supposed to be the one band that was going to stay with Columbia. They didn't want to go back to Earache. They had more issues with Earache management around that time.
Everybody did. Digby was kind of a shyster, apparently.
Yeah, but Carcass was originally staying with Columbia, if I recall right. I'm sorry if I'm getting a few of the details wrong here, but I think the deal was that Carcass recorded Song, and it was supposed to come out through Columbia, solely through Columbia. And when they sent Columbia the tapes, Columbia was just like, what you doing? We don't want this. And basically just like, here, you can just have this back. And they kind of ended up going back to Earache to get the album out, but it was all very awkward. There's, and again, sorry if I'm a little off on my details, I'm a little rusty on it, but even just getting the album out, I mean, having to sort of bounce from being on Earache / Columbia, then just Columbia, then back to just Earache, who they had kind of trashed, and then had to kind of come back to. He's like, hey, remember us? You want to release one more album for us after all? That had to be awkward as hell.
That had to be awkward.
Involved. And so I mean, even just even the business side of it was just a real nightmare for the band. I get why the album they didn't put more into the album, and why this really did have to be their song at the time. But that said, I can still listen to this and enjoy a good chunk of it. I like the run. I'm looking at the track list right now. Really, the run of the first 4 songs, I like all of those. Tomorrow Belongs to No One, Black Star, Cross My Heart. Are they as good as the tracks on Heartwork? No, they're a step down, but they're still close enough there that I can enjoy, that first run. And then a few songs here and there later on the album too. So, I certainly recognize the problems with the album, but I don't hate it the way some folks do. And I can take it. It's fine. It's okay by me, despite its problems.
Well, and obvious, there's a stylistic shift to more simplistic rock-oriented music. Bill Steers obviously not in it, and there's a new guitar player involved. His name is Carlo Regatas. And after Bill bails out of the band, Ken Owen, Carlo Regatas, and Jeff Walker splinter off after Carcass's demise and start a band called Black Star. Mm-hmm. And that album to me is kind of a proof in the pudding that it wasn't Bill Steers' direction choice. I mean, he probably had a hand in wanting to go more rock because he had that band Firebird, But Black Star
Yeah.
sounds a lot like the continuation of Swan Song. It sounds like the follow-up to Swan Song, rock groove style. I used to own it. I got rid of it, gave it away. It was bad.
Don't think I've ever heard that one.
I want to
If I
say
did,
the
I
name of
don't.
the
If I do,
album.
I have no memory of it.
I'm going to type it in here. I can't remember. I think it was just self-titled. I can't. I kind of wish I still had it to check it out. Oop. Blackster. That's not the one. Black Star. United Kingdom. They did a promo 96 in 1996, and then Barbed Wire Soul was the name of the full length. But it's got 2 reviews on Metal Archives, and it's got an 80% rate, 86% rating, which is, I believe, higher than what the rating is of Swan Song on Metal Archives as well. Swan Song,
Let's see.
70%.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, but it just seems like a follow-up to Swan Song to me, and I was not interested. Black Star Rising, that's right, Black Star Rising. Which, okay, the band breaks up. They get back together in 2007. They reform for some live shows, like I mentioned, Wacken and the Tuska Open Air Festival. And they did a little reunion tour after that. And then in 2013, they put out this Surgical Steel.
Yep, almost 20 years later, so it's been a minute.
Yeah, it strikes me as an album. You could tell they had something to prove on this.
Yeah, what were your initial thoughts when you heard that Carcass was getting back together and going to release a new album? Were you excited about it? Were you hesitant? How did you feel about that announcement?
Morbid curiosity. I mean, I kind of figured that they would try to put out an album that sounded like Heartwork. I figured that's where they were going to go because it's their most popular, probably highest selling album. I will say they did. This could have been the follow-up to Heartwork, but actually this could have been the follow-up to Necroticism. This could have been the album. This could have been the transitional album between Necroticism and Heartwork to me. I think it's got the Heartwork sheen to it, but you know, songs like Captive Bolt Pistol and there's some great, intense, awesome, ass-ripping songs on this record, and it's hard not to like it. It's really solid. I like this album maybe better than Heartwork. I know people are like, oh, how can you say that? But you know, I haven't listened to this album as much as Heartwork, so I know Heartwork better. But just the intent, there seems to be more of a familiar intensity to this stuff that appeals to me a bit more than Heartwork, perfectly written album. This is in that wheelhouse, just a little bit more aggressive. You could tell the drummer they got is a better drummer than Ken Owen was. He's a good blaster. He's a good technical drummer. And I think it's the same guy that's still with them at this point.
I think so. Yeah, worth noting. Yeah, Ken Owen, of course, not with the band after health issues in the late 90s.
Yep, he had a brain tumor or something. It really fucked him up bad. But
yeah, brain hemorrhage or something like that.
In fact, they took him out on some of these shows. He'd come out on stage and stuff. I mean, they're all still friends. I mean, it wasn't anything personal, but
no, it was strictly health issues.
To me, this is a great album. What do you think?
I think what you said is a very great summation of it. When they announced they were doing a new album, I was kind of like, okay, that's cool. I'm always very leery of bands getting back together, especially after a lot of time has passed.
Oh yeah.
Is there a reason for this other than just to make some money? If you're doing it to make money, I can't hold that against you. But is there going to be anything of quality here? And this is one of those happy occasions where, they delivered quite well. And everything you said about the album, it has a lot of the qualities of Heartwork, but they made it just dirty enough that it doesn't sound too shiny. They made it more intense. The focus is on the intensity. It sounds, as you said, like a band that had something to prove, that they wanted to show that, Swan Song wasn't going to be the end of their legacy, and they weren't going to come back and just rehash Heartwork or any other album from their career. This one has its own sound. It has elements of Heartwork. It's got maybe elements of, yeah, the more furious earlier albums, but it's its own unique blend of those elements. It's and it works quite well. Yeah, for me, it's an album where there's not, I don't put this on because I want to hear individual songs. I can't say there's tracks that stand out way above or way below the others, other than double checking, looking at the track list right now because I'm going to get it wrong if I don't.
Yeah, the 1985 intro track was from their demo. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like Master's Butcher's Apron is one I like a lot on here. And there's one other one that I like a lot. But, for the most part, it's just a very solid album start to finish. It doesn't have a lot of highs or lows. It's, very consistent. It's a great comeback.
It is.
They reestablished themselves quite nicely. So kudos to them. They pulled it off, and very few bands, in my opinion, do that. So gotta like that.
James Cooney, Carcass's logo has been the same since '87. Well, it's not on this. There's a pink. I don't know. This is just.
It is a weird cover.
It's weird.
I'll defend the album, but I won't defend that cover.
It's cool to see a lot of people on here going on about Surgical Steel, and it's worthy. It's worthy of the praise. It's really good.
It is, yeah. And you're certainly not the only person I've heard say, I think this is better than Heartwork. And yes, everybody always flinches when they say that. They're, waiting for something to get thrown at them. But a lot of people, other people have said, they feel it is a better album, and some people put it as high as any of their other albums. That it's almost got that perfect blend of the different Carcass elements that they never quite got. Like you said, they kind of jumped from necroticism to Heartwork is very noticeable, and this album slides very nicely and gets kind of a little bit of the best of both worlds.
Well, here's one. Can't say it's better than Heartwork, but it's great. I mean, it to me, it fits in the transitional album between necroticism and Heartwork. That it would have made more sense if that was the album for sure. But after that, they put out this Surgical Remission Surplus Steel EP. Apparently, this is the dude from they're from Michigan. Oh fuck! Why can't I think of their name? Oh, Black Dahlia Murders tattoo. Anyway, this to me is not a good EP. This thing is just kind of, you could tell they're leftover tracks from the from Surgical Steel that didn't make the grade. I mean, it's just it's just not. The songs are really kind of boring to me.
Yeah, I never heard it, but that was the general take I got reading reviews. I was just like, yeah, here's a few leftover bits and pieces. If you're a real diehard fan, it's just like, I can pass on that.
Yeah. And that leads up to, I mean, there was some other stuff a bunch of stuff came out too, but I actually reviewed this on this channel. But this is the Carcass Despicable EP. This was supposed to come out after Torn Arteries, but due to the pandemic, they chose to hold back the release date of Torn Arteries and put this out instead. This has got 4 tracks on it: The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, The Long and Winding Beer Road, Under the Scalpel Blade, and Slaughtered in Soho. Basically, for me, the first song, The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, is the prime cut on this. They put the best song first. The other 3 tracks sound like they could have been swan song throwaways to me. But again, this is all scraps from the Torn Artery sessions that they just put off on an EP.
Yeah, that again, I didn't pick it up, but other folks had kind of the same take as what you just described. Here's one new song to get everybody interested, and a few B-sides that hey, you got to fill out an EP with something. You can't give them all the good songs, or people won't want to get the album when it comes out.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts on this too. Yeah, but it leads us to what we were wanting to discuss today, and that is Torn Arteries, the 7th full-length album came out this year, 2021, and thoughts, Alan? Very slick aesthetic.
Yeah, it is definitely one of the big, anticipated releases for the year. If we're starting with the aesthetic, I'll start with the aesthetics. I don't like the aesthetics on this. I don't have any problem with the image, the cover image thing, but
it's
it's very
cool.
much.
I don't know how they did
It's
this,
a neat
but
idea.
it's pretty cool.
It's a neat idea, and having sort of the opposites, on the back cover with the same thing but made of meat. Yeah, okay, I get it. That's fine. My problems with this are a couple of fold, though. First off, just the general layout. It very much reeks of more and more metal album covers in the Spotify era, where the artwork is designed to be viewed on somebody's itty bitty little cell phone screen when they're listening to it on Spotify, that you just want a very plain background and one large central image right in the middle, so somebody can glance at their phone and immediately see, oh, that's the Carcass album thing. It's I see more albums doing that, more bands doing that kind of thing, and I just find it kind of a lame approach. Metal in particular has a very rich history of very detailed and fantastical cover artwork, where you're supposed to really be able to kind of get lost in the image and look at the details. And this kind of thing is just like, here's the brand for the new album, brand it. Here's our brand. You see our brand, you can't miss this because it's just one thing. Your short attention span, just look at this one thing on this very plain background, branded. And it just kind of irks me a little bit. The other thing that irks me with it is the booklet. If I pull it out of the case, okay, there's the same picture on the front and the picture inside, and same thing taken a day later, I guess, and then 14 hours later. And it's just like, do we really need, every page in the booklet to just show us this thing slowly, going through the different stages of decay? It keeps going. I've read that, yes, the band was sort of making a statement that this was, a Japanese tradition of the 9 stages of a corpse going through decomposition. That might be a little too clever for anybody to really get unless you just read that quote directly. The other thing that annoys the shit out of me personally here, all the lyrics are completely jumbled up. And that's not a huge thing. You don't have to sit down and read along with the lyrics, but it's just word soup. I think all the lyrics are in there, but it's all just kind of mixed up wacky stuff. So it's like, okay, there's nothing much to look at in here. Every page is a picture of the same thing in a slightly different state, and the words to the song, except they're not quite really in the right order. Oops.
Which is dumb. It's dumb.
So what is the fucking point of this booklet? I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? There's really nothing to look at. There's really nothing to read in it. What was the point of making this, multi-page, very glossy thing? I'll be very honest here. If I had known this was the layout for the packaging before I bought it, I kind of bought this on impulse when it came out, so I happened to be at the record store like the next day. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go ahead and pick it up. If I had known this was the layout for the booklet, I would have just bought a download of the album and been perfectly content with that, because this is fucking useless.
Eric says, I guess the point is to rile Alan up.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Really, because it serves no purpose. I could have had the music on digital download, had the exact same music, and I wouldn't have lost anything. The general, let's face it, CDs, not a real popular format. They don't sell incredibly well by everyone's accounting these days. If you want people to buy your CDs, you've got to give some people something in the packaging to really make it worth their acquiring the physical product. There is nothing here that makes it worth acquiring this physical product, unless you just really want to hear it through a better stereo system than what your computer can produce. And if so, that's fine. We'll get to the sonics in a minute, and it is a very sonically great sounding album. But in terms of the rest of the packaging, this is just a waste of materials. There's nothing there that's where I didn't get anything in that packaging. I wouldn't have gotten buying the downloads off of MP3s off of Amazon or eMusic or any other music subscription service. I didn't get a damn extra thing for having bought the physical product.
Eric says, Alan, unsubbed. I understand your complaints, but there's something about the artwork. I mean,
it's a neat piece of art. I'm not saying that.
I bitched about the simplicity and cleanliness of artwork, and this is kind of the same thing. It's very simplistic, but I like the message. I like the I don't know. I just kind of like the artwork on this. I thought it turned out pretty interesting, although I will 100% agree with you. The lyrics, the word soup that they made out of the lyrics is really fucking dumb. Why would you take the time to write lyrics and then just slop them together to get them to fit inside a heart's outline? But I mean, I like the fact you turn the page that it's right. I mean, they kind of beat us over the head with the message, and Simon said, if you flip through it, it like decays like a movie, like the flip comics.
Kind of fun. They've developed the same level of technology my 7-year-old uses for drawing cartoon kids in second grade.
Dean might become a great artist. He might become a great artist someday.
Yeah.
So
and just to be clear, I have no problem. Yes, it is a neat image, but the fact that it's all that's there, page after page after page, just in slightly decomposed form. There's just nothing else to it. If they'd done other stuff with the booklet, if this was on the front, this was on the back, and the booklet was, the lyrics were in order, you've got other pictures, you've got whatever, I probably wouldn't bitch about the packaging. But the fact that they've got this, one kind of neat conceptual piece of art, and they just take that one ball and that's the only play they've got. Yeah, it irked me. It did.
So what'd you think about the album?
Sonically, it is a really great sounding album. Production-wise, it has a very warm sound. It's a very full sound, but it's not an overly clean sound. It's not sterile in any way. It works. It's got almost an organic sound to it, which I guess kind of fits in with the whole vegetarian theme once again. So production is really, really top notch. It's it doesn't sound like surgical steel. Again, surgical is a little more raw around the edges in a good sense. But yeah, this one's really, really rounded out really nicely.
To me, sonically, my wife's vehicle's got a very good sound system in it, and the more I turn this up, the better it sounds. It's just really crisp and clean, but like you said, it doesn't lose the edge to it. It's just produced perfectly. It really is. It's the louder, I mean, every instrument can be heard. Every piece of hardware on that drum kit cuts through the mix. The vocals sit just right in it. The guitars are they've got a very malevolent tone to them. But the music itself, I would say, this album is very much every era of Carcass sandwiched into one album. There's even, the swan song feel in here, which I ended up not hating on this because the songwriting is way better. Bill Steer, I mean, the band is basically a three-piece at this point. It's Bill, Jeff, and the drummer. I can't remember his name. God damn it. Getting old rules. Dan Wilding. He drums, and he does some vocals on it too. They all take turns doing vocals. But my point, what was I going with? Bill Steer's guitar work is really kind of groundbreaking and unique on this album. It's very much, throwing some very strange blasting grind parts. He's throwing very rocky but intricate and atypical fills and runs, and it's just so refreshing to hear that. After all these years, he's still kind of innovating as a guitar player, yet sounding very much like himself. It sounds like a Carcass album, but there is a lot of interesting things going on. You got they're continuing on with the lopsided vocal arrangements, which is very cool. The songs are really solid. And when they released, I think the video for Dance of Ixtab, on its own in the video, I'm like, oh, this isn't a good song. This is kind of a bad choice. But in the context of the album, it sounds great. I don't know what it is when you remove it from the context of the track listing. The song I found it quite boring, but when I listen to this, nothing really bores me, even though there are obvious shifts. I would have liked more grind. You can tell they kind of backed off on it after Surgical Steel. They went for more of a refined mid-paced attack in these songs, which is fine. I mean, Carcass are so good at the grind, and when he does it, he does these weird atypical fills and runs on it. It's just, I want more of it. I'm like, oh my God, that's such a tasty riff. I want more of that. But we got more of a mid-paced album here, but it's still really well written. The lyrics seem really smart as always. It's really a shame that we can't sit down and really ponder them along with the lyric sheets because it's so stupid. But yeah, I mean, I think this was a really good. It's been 8 years since Surgical Steel came out. That's longer than it took Metallica to write Death Magnetic. And
I was a bit thrown when I realized it had been so long between the two albums. It didn't seem like that long of a gap. But yeah, those are all really good comments on it. They definitely back off the aggression on this one compared to Surgical Steel. There are still faster, some aggressive tracks in here, but for a bunch of vegetarian guys, they're going for a very balanced diet on this album. It really does incorporate stuff from all their eras, a little here and a little there. The one complaint I've heard from some folks here and there is that yes, they do wish there was a little bit more of the blasting, a little bit more of the grind, and I think the band is just always going to have to live with that. There are always going to be those fans that want them to again just go back to writing 2-minute songs and just pummel away at them. The band's not going to do that. Bill Steers in the Rolling Stone interview said flat out, it's like, I think it'd be really dishonest of us to go back. I think that was the word he used, was dishonest, to write an album full of just blasting. That's not even, we haven't done that in ages. It's not where we're at. There's going to be, that's part of their history, but that's not what they're going to do in this day and age. I get that. But yeah, it's a very strong album, start to finish. What you said about the Dance of Ixtab video, I kind of felt the same way about the single that got a lot of play on Sirius Radio, Kelly's Meat Emporium. Just hearing that song by itself.
That's the one that came out on this first. Yeah.
Okay.
And I like that song.
It's not bad within the context of the album. Just hearing it by itself on the radio when they play, oh, and here's a cut from the new Carcass album, like, oh, good. Kelly's Meat Emporium. Okay. And it really didn't click with me much hearing it on the radio. So I was like, well, I guess it's okay. But when it's playing through with the rest of the album, it's like, okay, yeah, it fits. It's an album that seems to be put together very well to kind of let these songs move from one to another.
It's very strange. Like when you remove something from it and it sounds completely different. I mean, it shows that they really spent a lot of time in crafting the song, the track listing for sure.
Yeah, and that's usually a sign of an album that is very well put together, that when you play those songs in that order, it actually, you get more than the individual parts are drawn out of them. Yeah. So yeah, sonically it's great. Musically, it's very cool. It's its own album once again. It doesn't sound exactly like any album out of Carcass's discography. It stands on its own 2 feet, or 4 legs, or whatever kind of animal it is. Yep. I'll stop with the animal and joke. But yeah, it's yet another good Carcass album that holds
Very
up really
mature.
well.
The songwriting is pretty mature.
Yeah, yeah, and again, they're still doing the same. In some way, they're still doing the same thing they were doing, 40 years ago. You still have this kind of British humor worked into these overly wordy song titles. With Dance of Ixtab, I mean the whole song title is actually let's get it right. Dance of Ixtab, Psycho Pomp and Circumstance, March #1 in B. And there's a lot of little wordplay kind of buried in there based on Ixtab and the numbers and letters and the game Hangman and all this stuff. They're still making it sound a little intellectual at the same time that they're obviously just having fun and using that very wry British sense of humor to good effect at the same time.
No baloney. Anna Zoli says Surgical felt like they were trying to please fans, and Torn sounds more like they were pleasing themselves more again, and I appreciate that. There is an element of that, I think, for sure.
There could be, like we discussed on Surgical. Yeah, it felt like they had something to prove, that they they were going to come back with something very strong to put all the naysayers and such to rest, that we're back and we're not doing any bullshit this time whatsoever. But yeah, they don't now. They're also at the point where they don't have to do that again. They came back, they proved it, and now they are a band with such a pedigree. They can do whatever they want. They've been at it a long time. If they want to go off in different directions, they're going to be able to do that. They've earned their stripes and bought their sort of license to try out whatever strikes their fancy. And hey, they still seem to be putting out really cool stuff along the way. Good for them.
Alan, even though you hate the new album artwork, there's no love lost.
Not for the band overall, not for the music. And again, yeah, I mean, the music is the part that's most important, as much as the packaging. And again, it's more, to just be clear one more time, it's the packaging that bothers me more than just that piece of artwork. That piece of artwork is actually very cool. It's a neat idea. Packaging fucking blows.
Well, that's it. We knuckled and scraped through the whole catalog for sure. And we will be back on Friday, folks. Austin from Panopticon will be joining us. So we're still ironing out the topic. I think we have something, but we'll disclose that on Friday. And then I think the week after, on Christmas Eve, we will be taking the night off. We both have kids we need to manage and do our best Santa Claus impersonation, eat our cookies, and
what are you talking about, Marty? We got to go to bed so Santa can leave our presents.
I'm still waiting on the time to tell my kid the bad news about the whole Santa thing, because last year, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, I was still up waiting for him to go to bed because he was so excited. And it's time. He's 11.
We're getting a lot of questions this year. I am afraid this is going to be the last year for our kid. There's too many little brats at school who are already making a stink about it and stuff, and we're going to be able to get through this season with it, but I don't think we'll have another next year's Christmas. I believe a little bit of that magic will be lost. I'm sad to say.
No, it's a bummer, and it was fun while it lasted, but he knows, he just doesn't want to rock the boat. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to know the truth, and then he thinks it's somehow going to impact his Christmas, which it doesn't.
Usually once they figure out that, wait, I still get the same amount of presents, right? Okay, then I'm cool with it.
I'm cool, yeah.
Indeed. All right. Well, Marty, this has been quite fun. Nice kind of shorter format, something a little more digestible for everybody. There I go with the damn food jokes again.
Well, we're going to start maybe, reviewing albums, short formats, do super short things here and there, things that like you said, we don't think it's going to really fit in the longer format of the Friday streams. It's been fun. I mean, there's still 52 people watching, so it's
great. I had no idea how many folks would be interested tonight, but thank you very much to everybody who tuned in and watched. That's really cool that y'all took some time to listen to us talk Carcass for an hour.
Yeah, and we're throwing your opinions around in the chat. We love it. It's really cool. I'm glad people, I mean, obviously Carcass is a band that people are very passionate about. They've been a very long-standing band, not necessarily the most prolific band,
Nope.
but they're certainly influential and have really put their mark on extreme metal for sure.
Quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity, exactly. Other than
Yep.
a few bumps in the road.
Yep.
But
And I think we've got in the rough plans. Maybe we'll be back next Wednesday night and try something else too.
well, that's right. That's going to be a fun one. That'll be fun.
Yep. So if folks are, that's going to be getting close to Christmas. So, if you got your holiday shopping done, or you're looking for something to listen to while you're wrapping presents, or if you're just like me trying to hide in your man cave while your in-laws are hanging around, then we'll be back next week to entertain you one more time before Santa comes down the chimney.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Alan, thanks a lot for hanging. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out in the chat. We will be back in a couple days.
See y'all soon.
Cheers.